I'd like to welcome everyone, and let me just share my screen. Oh, no, you don't want that. And I'll just get the PowerPoint going. So, all right, does that work? So welcome everyone this is the last in our series for this year for the speaker series. So thank you for attending, and hopefully other people will enjoy or will join us soon. So I would like to just acknowledge everyone that's here and thank Bonnie for coming. So this is a bit about what we're about. We're trying to get gender equality and empower all women and girls. And this is the Sustainable Goals, developmental goals from the UN that this topic addresses. And there's been a lot of research out there showing the need for getting girls into science and text and that. So I'm very excited about that. So anyhow, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, BPW Ontario members acknowledge that we gather on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, Chippewa, Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Adirondack, the Wendat, Huron-Wendat, Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Ashametising, the Anishinaabe, the Métis, and Inuit people. We are grateful for the opportunity to work with Indigenous peoples who continue to live in these lands to create a safer and more abundant future for all girls and women and girls. So the idea statement we came up with a few years ago, Bonnie. BPW Ontario welcomes all people who identify as women, regardless of race, religion, age, nationality, citizenship, geographic location, ability, marital status, socioeconomic status, education, sexual orientation, gender identity, and is committed to providing an inclusive, welcoming, and empowering environment for all members. And this is our club colic, and it's a nice way for us to focus, especially if we've had busy days. May we see each other beyond pettiness, fault finding, and all forms of prejudice. Let us meet each other face to face with honesty, patience, and generosity of spirit. May we go forward unafraid, confidently putting into action plans that are carefully considered and adequately debated. May we depart with the knowledge that through BPW and our collective energies, we can impact upon the greater good more than can be realized alone. And may we have the strength to abide by our convictions and the reward of sharing our burdens. And I can't see because of the thing. What's the last line, girls? I can't see it. And all we do. So Bonnie is here today to speak with us. She's got quite an interesting background. And anyhow, so she's an engineer. She's part of the coalition, Canadian Coalition of Women in something science tech. What's it stand for again? I'm having a mental moment. So engineering, science, trades, and technology, yeah. Right? Yeah. So she's got a very interesting story, and I'm looking forward to hearing your story. So I'm going to let you take it away, Bonnie. You've got about 20 minutes to share all your wonderful information.
Thank you very much for having me. So I'm excited to be here to speak with you tonight. I have lots of my story I'm ready to share. I'll watch the time to make sure I don't talk at length, but I'm getting good at sharing my story the more that I tell it. And when I tell the story, you'll start to kind of see how that's been a work in progress my entire life. So glad to be here. My name's Bonnie Douglas. My pronouns are she, her. I am located in London, Ontario, and through my own reconciliation journey, I've learned that that's the Treaty 2 territory, which was signed in 1790. And through my own ancestry work, I have learned that many of my own ancestors have been on Turtle Island in the area that's now known as Ontario before that treaty was even signed. So I've done a lot of reflection on what their role may have been in the early colonization of the area where I live. I grew up in rural southwestern Ontario, not a city girl. So I identify very much as both rural and urban because I am now working and living and raising my own family in the urban environment, but I know how a farm works. So if there's anyone from Huron County, shout out to Huron County, Clinton, Goderich, all those wonderful small towns. I know them all. Other elements of my own intersectionality is that I have built my career working in the field of engineering. As I mentioned, I am the ancestor of settlers to this country. I identify as a woman, a parent, And I like to add the additional intersection of musician because it matters to me, and you'll hear why. I have built a 20-year career in food manufacturing, working in this male-dominated field, technical spaces, mostly in the London area for big companies like Kellogg and Nestle, as industrial engineering, continuous improvement, and production manager. 4 years ago, I decided to transition to the nonprofit world as a project manager for who I'm currently working for, the Canadian Coalition of Women in Engineering, Science, Trades, and Technology. And I like to say that now I'm using my powers and my project management skills for good, because it's something I believe in and something that I was already doing in my volunteer life prior to making the shift in my career. So I'm happy to be paid to do this work, which is rare. And I'd like to see many more women being able to do it. And certainly, based on your own values and your own organization, you know that gender equity and inclusion work is not done. And particularly in the fields of science, engineering, trades, and technology, we do have a lot of work to do. Most of my career has been managing and implementing process improvement in the factory environment, including things like data analytics, reporting, but also in order to be successful at process and continuous improvement, there's a large component of people management and influencing people and working with people, of which I worked a lot to hone those skills in my career as well. So again, thanks for having me here tonight. I'm happy to be sharing my journey, including the story of what led me here. So the young Bonnie, you'll meet the young Bonnie too, the successes and failures along the way, but more importantly, how I found my voice and how I followed my own path in a male-dominated career. So let's take the Wayback Machine and we'll go visit the young Bonnie. I was a nonconformist at a young age. So some may not be surprised that I sought to seek a career that was non-traditional or male-dominated. Even very young, I knew what I liked and didn't like. So for example, if you were ever a member of the Girl Guides, Brownies, you know that the lowest level of entry for that program is the Sparks level. And it wasn't for me. I was in Sparks and all the other girls were doing it. And I was looking around and I was like, I don't like this. I told my mom, I don't want to go there anymore. And she said, okay. So whatever it was that I didn't like about that environment, it was not for me. And I knew that. And I made sure people knew. And I also didn't want to be anyone else but me, which is an important reflection for me when I think about moving forward in my career. I remember an assignment that was in about grade 4 or grade 5, where we had to write an essay for that age. Who do you wish you could be? And I struggled to answer the question because I honestly didn't want to be anyone else. And I ended up remembering kind of making up an answer that wasn't very honest. Because I honestly was like, no, I kind of like who I am. I'm good. So wherever that confidence came from, it's helped me along the way. But it's important to note that I was very quiet in my nonconformity. So in fact, in grade 2, my mom was asked for a meeting with my teacher, who explained that my writing with the pencil had become so faint because I was too shy to put up my hand to ask to sharpen a pencil. So there was a lot of work, and you look at my report cards that say, Bonnie does great work. She's very, very diligent. She doesn't talk. She doesn't talk at all. She doesn't share her ideas. She just does her work. But by the age of 11, the music teacher put a trumpet in my hand. So my chosen instrument actually wasn't my chosen instrument, but that's what he gave me, a trumpet. And I found my voice through that quite literally. So I was a shy, quiet girl. I learned how to make some noise. And in that role, that's a trumpet role in a band, if you know, that demanded me to be heard and in tune and with the lead melody most of the time. So as my confidence grew in music, because I was proficient at it, so did my confidence in other areas as well. So I started to take a leadership role whenever music was concerned. So I was running my own brass quintet in high school. We did gigs. You know, I did like the administrative work for the band. I led and recruited and even fired people from that brass quintet, other classmates. And I was playing the last post at my elementary school on Remembrance Day, like putting myself out there where I would have been terrified to talk. I could play. So that was something happened to me in school that was transforming. So there was also something else that when I reflect upon my career, that's relevant to who I became. So while I was still being quiet, I was still generally quiet and rarely sharing my views or putting up my hand unless I was like 100% sure my answer was correct. I just didn't want to be embarrassed that I was wrong. I had to learn that the hard way just by failing. The teachers often placed me in groups with other students who weren't quite as self-disciplined as I was. And I found myself more often than not seated in the back of the room between two misbehaving, often boys. I was an informal buffer. I was a peer tutorer. I was clearly useful for the teacher for class management, keeping the boys in line. But what I didn't realize was I was gaining the much needed skills to successfully work and influence boys. I was learning what they like. I was being their friend. And that actually really helped me in my career when I was working with lots of men, because our interests became similar. So perhaps my teachers back then wouldn't be surprised that I opted to study engineering and ended up working in a male-dominated industry, but I certainly didn't see my path at the time. At home, I couldn't flex my working muscles for working with boys. I have 3 sisters. And as a teenager, my mom was raising us by herself. So it's all women influences in my house. And I drifted towards, within that household, I drifted towards taking on more traditionally male roles, like fixing stuff. Somebody had to fix stuff. I felt like I was competent to fix the stuff, and solving technical problems around the house as my role in the family. And at school, I was excelling in music, math, and science, but I needed to choose a course of study. My mom was instilling in us 4 girls the need to gain employable skills so we could be independent. I appreciate all the effort she put into this. So she didn't say that we had to go to university or college. Didn't matter to her as long as we had skills so we could be independent and have a job. And so I chose a practical career choice. Music remained a hobby even today. But it was my music and science, or my math and science interest, that I pursued. So why I really went into engineering also is kind of a window into who I was. So what happened was somebody in high school said, oh, there's this engineering event at Western University. We're going to send a busload of girls down for this engineering event for girls only. They said, why? Well, engineering is for people who are good at science and math. Oh, okay, that's good. I'm good at science and math. I didn't know any other engineer. Like growing up in a rural area, nobody worked as an engineer. Didn't know what the job was. And at that event, I learned that women are underrepresented in engineering, which is still true 25 years later, which somehow motivated me even more. So I set out to pursue engineering because I was good at math and science, and precisely because it was male dominated, because I was confident in my academic abilities, and I just set out to prove myself and become a number in women's favor. I said, I can help that number go up. Here I go. So even to this day, I don't really recall anyone ever telling me that I shouldn't do it or that I couldn't do it. Everyone was fairly supportive. Perhaps they just didn't want to disappoint me, but I really believe that there wouldn't be any issues. I was ready for it. So off I go. I go and I study. I chose food engineering because, again, very practically, I said, oh, there's always going to be jobs in food. People have to eat. This seems to make sense. I also had some interest in, how food was made. So off I go. So I studied biological and food engineering at the University of Guelph co-op program. So I had some work terms in there. I was unsure at the beginning if it was really for me. It was really hard. Like there's a high workload. There's a lot of expectations on even engineering. But I found that it complemented my interest in problem solving. I found my people there who I didn't necessarily find in my small rural area. People like me, some of them also musicians. So amazingly, people studying engineering who are also musicians. And I was really fortunate to have a ratio in my graduating class that was 50-50 men to women, which is rare. It has actually been decreasing since I was there. My experience was one of that high pressure and hard work, but also very collaborative and supportive with that kind of gender ratio. So although we only had 2 women who were professors, my role models were peers, not superiors or coaches or mentors. So it was hard to find role models who were women. So off we all went, including me, into the working world. And because I was in the co-op program at Guelph, it helped me get my first job. So that was great. It was a great program for me because I didn't know anybody in engineering. So one of my employers for a co-op program hired me as my first job. It was a big adjustment, like switching from that world of studying, work hard, do your exams, stop, get a break, switch to something else. You're done with that subject, you never have to do it again, you do something else. That doesn't exist in the working world, which was really hard for me. So this never-ending cyclical nature of business, like financial year end, okay, you don't have a summer break, like I don't get a summer break off this semester, are you kidding me? Like this is not good. So every year, especially in industry, you know, you're making improvements, and then the next year they're like, yeah, great improvements, you have to do even better next year. It's over and over. It's relentless, and it never stopped. So I was feeling, even at that time, I was saying things like, I think working is killing my soul. Like I didn't feel like I had like those creative outlets. It was very, very grindish, right? Like grinding through work, just day to day, month to month, week to week. And like many young women entering male-dominated work cultures, I was facing toxic masculinity, sexualization. I had to prove myself over and over again to be heard and respected. At first, I couldn't tell if the challenges were because I was junior, I was young, or a woman, or both. But by watching the women around me, I could see that their challenges weren't going away as they gained seniority. So it was harder for them because they were women. And I somehow didn't expect that, but it was happening all around me. So I also noticed, I started to adapt to the workplace. So I was noticing things like male colleagues' eyes were wandering when they're speaking with me, and I'm supposed to be their supervisor. So I started to change what I was wearing. I actually did. I was actually actively removing certain types of tops from my work wardrobe, relegating them to like personal time only and never wearing them to work again. In my early career, I had very few women mentors and no women bosses, but I was learning from other women. I was learning what to do and what not to do in the workplace. There were really disturbing stories of sexual harassment and lots of off-putting sexualized comments. And I counted myself lucky that my experiences were not extreme. And to be honest, at the time, I dismissed most of them as like, well, that's what it's like to work with men. And more often than not just kind of laughing it off. But as I rose in the ranks, found myself as a junior supervisor working on the production floor. And although I was young, and because of my gender, many, particularly men, doubted my technical skills, I was confident enough in my youth as a supervisor to start to create boundaries around the language I would and would not accept, for example. So I recognize that shop floor culture uses, let's say, rough language, but there's at least one swear word that I will not accept. And it was very early on in my career, group of men, it was mostly men working for me when I was a supervisor. The word, it starts with a C, was used, and I said, nope. I said, I recognize, like, you swear, if you're angry, you swear, I get how it works in the shop floor, but do not use that word around me. And it was like, yes, boss. And I never heard it again, not once. They probably said it somewhere else, maybe even about me, but I never heard it. So, and also there's a tendency for people to always assume kind of a default male terminology or insisting on traditional gender roles, joking or not joking or whatever. All of that I would discourage on my team. So I was starting to make those like little just corrections as we'd go, right? So why are they assuming that the new boss is a male, for instance, right? You don't know them. It could be a woman. And they go, oh, well, maybe you're right. Sometimes it was. So over time, I was able to gain respect on the technical side. I was gaining male allies, but it wasn't easy. It certainly wasn't. It was way harder than any male coming into the same working environment. So one of my biggest lessons was something that many of you probably relate to, which is personally when things get frustrating, my emotions get the better of me. And for me, the tears come. That's what happens to me. So I tried to control and suppress tears at work. People just weren't supposed to cry in the factory. Like, it's just, that's not what you do. So my tribe of women on the shop floor, we had techniques to allow ourselves to cry. So we would support each other, find the space. Because sometimes we cry. I mean, let's just get real. Sometimes work just isn't going our way and it's frustrating, but we would hide it and suppress the need to cry and the existence of crying because it made the men uncomfortable. But over time, I finally accepted that, hey, I cannot stop it. Like, there's just no stopping. When it's time for me to just get upset, the tears just come. So it's an authentic part of me. It took a very long time for me to accept that because I was trying to conform to the expected environment. But I've learned that I can move. I just cry, then I move past them. It's all part of my process. And when my emotions are overwhelmed. And as a leader, I was able to advocate for women who had a similar response. So I'll use one example where there was a woman on the shop floor who had not a tendency, but when she got really upset because she cared about her job, she would cry. And the manager came running in to me and said, "You have to make it stop. She's crying out there on the shop floor. You have to make it stop." I said, "You cannot make it stop." It's just feelings. Like, it will be short. She's going to cry because she's upset, but she's going to come back. She knows her stuff and she's going to solve that problem. And that's exactly what happened. So I was working really hard to normalize that, accepting the traditional, like, women emotions and sensitive responses would be much more accepting. So I am proud to say that I think it had an impact in that, and it allowed people to be more of themselves. So I'll talk a little bit about my transition to a working mom, because I do have a family. So again, no one ever really told me that I couldn't be a professional woman and be the mom I wanted to be. They didn't warn me about this. But it was not easy to move from someone who, had lots of hours to give to work, and then suddenly had to balance that out with raising a small child. So my partner and I both work full time. So we very practically divided the labor as evenly as possible, pickups, drop-offs. You make the lunches, I do the supper, all that great stuff. So theoretically, it would work, but at the beginning, it was really hard to leave work. Very, very stressful when it was like, I got to go. I got to get out the door where people are talking about stuff that seems important. I gotta go and pick up my infant at daycare. And there's days that I had some strong doubts if I could keep that up, but it did help me. Just gave it some time to mature and figure it out. It did help me put boundaries in place between my work and my personal life that I wasn't able to before. So I gained confidence to just tell people, you know what, by 4:30, I'm out the door. Like, do not book a meeting past that time. I will not be there. I'll be driving to pick up my kid. That's it. So I was very clear about the hours I was available. I created processes among my own team about how they should communicate me when I was off site, for example, just to make sure that I wasn't constantly working when I was supposed to be focusing on being at home. And I was also fortunate to work with many other people who had been there with young kids, so they understood, when the call comes and the kid's sick and you got to go, they don't worry, Bonnie, I'll take care of it. So that was very helpful too. So in closing, I'm using my project management skills, my lived experience now in my current career, and my voice to solve now systemic problems for women in science, engineering, trades, and technology, which I love. I love that I can say that. And along the way, I feel like I've learned that my voice has value. And I've used that voice, which was so tiny in the beginning, one that learned to literally trumpet and lead to help shift the beliefs of men at work. Like, I feel like I've cultivated a lot of male allies, and I have a few examples of that. So one is, there was a real tendency for men to say, "Oh, that's a women's issue," and I would call them on it and say, "Oh, no women's issues. They're just human issues. I mean, these are men that have wives and daughters, and usually I can appeal to them at that level." But I would just help them learn how to change those assumptions, right? Because there's terms like very commonly I would hear from men saying, just because a woman is a bit grumpy or snippy, oh, it must be her time of the month, right? So I was helping them to shift like, well, you know what? So and so, a man, is a bit grumpy today too. Do you want to tell me why you think that might be? Right. So, and just helping them learn that, humans are grumpy. It doesn't man, woman, otherwise. Some people, you're just grumpy or not grumpy, and that's okay. Men are also grumpy a lot, and I can't say that it's their time of the month. So fair enough. So I also spent a lot of time and effort mentoring other women and creating a space where they didn't have to work so hard for the things that I had to do. And even further, advocating for other folks who are underrepresented was something that I continue to do, but I was doing that in the factory environment as well. And that's something that I didn't see at the time. That was extra stuff that I was doing because I cared and I was trying to help, and I didn't want people to experience the same thing as me. But if you compare that to other men that I was working with, they could just go to work and do their job. They weren't worrying about mentoring other people and helping make space for other women, helping make space for other underrepresented folks. So those are some of the trigger points that kind of led to me saying, you know what, I'm working really hard here and I care a lot, and it just keeps going, and I think I need to change. So that's what kind of helped me lead to making a shift in my career as well. And there's one last thought that I'll leave you with, which was while working in manufacturing, that I had a colleague who was retiring. He, in his retirement speech, he expressed some regret for dedicating so much of his life to work and to the company while his own mother was sick. So he's looking back on that and saying, I kind of wish that I prioritized my family more. And he gave me some advice, which was very simple: do good things, he said. And I internalized that. And from that advice, I started to follow my own path. So I was more conscious about what good things I was doing in the workplace. But I was also shifting from a technical leadership role in manufacturing to one when the opportunity arrived to work in the advocacy space. I considered that as doing good things. And I thought that I had useful skills that I could apply to that direction. So I believe that I've done what I've done technically, and with all the great people that I've worked with, has all been good. And I hope that I have an even better impact in my current work as I work with more amazing people, largely amazing women, to make some real systemic change for others working in all of the fields that we support at the coalition, which is science, engineering, trades, and technology. And I'm using my voice to help support their work. So that is my whole story. Happy to answer any questions.
Wow.
I'm ready for the hard ones.
So
I'm good at hard questions, so lay them on me.
All right, ladies, go to it. Let's see what you can do.
Wow, that was really amazing. I come from a generation earlier than you were. You could be a teacher or a secretary, and that was it.
Yeah.
And when you expressed any desire to do anything out of that bracket, then you were heartily discouraged for it. So I think it's wonderful that you had the personality and the ability to stand up for what you really wanted. I'm really, really impressed.
Thank you. Actually, yeah, my mother had also that experience, like you said, being discouraged. And I think that's in part why she encouraged us to, she never told me that I couldn't or I shouldn't. But what she did say is, here's what happened to me. Right. So she said when she had the same interest and ability in math and science as I did when she was in high school. She was good at academics. And when it was time to choose her education, you're totally right. It was like, well, follow the path to be a teacher. So at that time, to follow the path to be a teacher, she was encouraged to study family studies. She also went to the University of Guelph. So she enrolled in family studies at the University of Guelph. In her first semester, she was helping her male classmates with their organic chemistry, but she wasn't supposed to be doing organic chemistry. She wasn't even supposed to like it. So she realized that she wanted to study science instead. She did switch her major to science. She didn't finish her bachelor's. She went on to teachers college and did become a teacher, but she teaches math. Well, she just retired, but she taught math and science for many years and instilled that love and passion for math and science in her own students as well. So yeah, she would always tell us that story so that we went after what we were interested in and weren't following the suggested path that others were giving us.
Awesome story there, Bonnie. Sharon?
Hi there, Bonnie. Thank you so much for talking to us tonight. I retired 2 years ago from Honda of Canada in manufacturing, auto manufacturing. So a lot of what you've spoken to tonight rings very true for me. I'm not an engineer, but I was in a leadership role. And, you know, when you talked about that soul crushing business cycle, oh man, I lived it for 30 years. But I really appreciated you talking about, you know, setting boundaries around language that you would and would not accept. I was in the exact same position where, yeah, we're in a shop, we're going to hear bad language, but you know, it didn't mean that we had to accept everything. And I, just as you did, like the guys knew what they could and couldn't say in my presence. And, you know, I had one of the plant managers once tell me, like, you have a pretty significant impact on the people around this building. I don't know if you realize that. So, you know, we really can use our voice to impact and to help for the younger women coming along. But I do have one question for you, and in light of your musical aptitude and interest, you know, I took music through school when I was young too, and I know that unfortunately a lot of music programs in schools are now, you know, on the chopping block.
This is true.
Do you see a correlation between music and aptitude in STEM? Because I have heard that there is some definite correlation there, and I'm just wondering, is it a chicken or the egg type of thing, and what your thoughts might be on that?
I'd have to look at the research, but I know that the research does show a correlation. I just don't know what the research might say about kind of a cause and effect thing. So, but in my experience, so anecdotally, music is broken down to mathematical form. So there are some fractions in there, right? And I don't realize because I've been doing it so long, but I'm watching my kids learn music. And for me, being it's so obvious how many beats might be in a measure, for them, they're like, what's happening? How does that work? But I believe there is a correlation because you also need to be able to think very quickly when you're playing music. Like you have to read those notes and correspond whatever you're doing, right, to make all the different notes. But I do find, I was going to say, what I encourage, and this is also just coming from my own experience. So I did not play sports, right? So my husband's all into the sports. His upbringing was all sports, and he's very adamant that, you know, our children should play group sports because they learn cooperation, and then they learn valuable skills, how to play and win and lose with other people. And I say, playing in a band gives you exactly the same skills, because you are making music together. You're not a soloist. You have to listen to them, and you need to adjust your own, whatever you're doing, to match them to make beautiful music. And it adds that artistic piece into it, right? The emotion, to add emotion to the music as a group is actually very challenging. And I play in a small and 8-piece brass group right now, and it's just us, we don't have a leader, we do our own thing. And that's what we find is so rewarding, is finding those, we can make music when it sounds really cohesive and together. That's when it's magical, right? The other thing that's interesting, I find, is the brass space. So playing in trumpet, all the brass instruments, trombone, horn, tuba, is also still a male dominated space. It's changing, but anyone that's proficient in those instruments and as a woman is generally of the younger generation. When you look at the older generation, it's dominated by men. So it's another space that I've constantly been in, where I'm counting, right? Like, oh, look at all the women, not quite the same as the men, right? So I think that's interesting as well. I even do it at my kids' school. I see the grade 8 class, and I'm saying, oh, how many girls have been encouraged to take brass instruments, right? Because there's often a gendered gendered encouragement on instruments for the girls to go to flutes and clarinets, and for the boys to go to tubas and trombones.
Very true. Thank you.
Anyone else? Bonnie, I'd just like to share, similar in the sense we have some similarities. I'm a teacher, but in high school, there were so many girls that were in the math and science area, just not the technology part that I knew of. And a lot of them went on to be doctors.
Yes.
And that I went to school with, and which is really important, but it's really exciting because I'm still as a high school teacher, I'm looked at as weird because I love science, right? Except for depending on, but ironically, we have a lot of female science teachers. And I said, yeah, this is cool stuff, and you want to dissect and like, I know, it's just so funny. But, it's just amazing. And I'm so excited that we're acknowledging, every opportunity I get, I talk to the girls, don't give up on your math and sciences, so Sheila.
Sure. I couldn't help, again, Sharon has indicated, having come from Honda, I would say Ford. So, but initially, starting out in the traditional, social work field, and working through that for many, many years, and then going back to school and shifting from the individual, helping individuals to look at systemic and organizational change in the workplace and all those kinds of wonderful things. And so then I went in and what I ended up doing is going into manufacturing. So I was a shock to them, I'm sure, just like you say. But one of the things, it made me think of, and I was reflecting on it just the other day with the announcement that came out around skilled trades and requirement for all students going into high school to have to take a course in the skilled trades and tech,
trades or tech.
Tech. And I thought,
yes.
Hallelujah, brother. What a wonderful, or hallelujah, sister, let's say, how wonderful that was. Because I remember sitting on many panels at college, at high schools, and talking with guidance counselors and doing that whole thing around, challenging the gender roles in career choices. And I also I just so much identified with, the whole, what are you going to be when you grow up? Excuse me, I'm going to be me. I just couldn't help it. That was what I was saying to myself all along when I was a little kid too. So it was a delight listening to you tonight. And any thoughts you have around how the skilled trades and tech industry, STEM industries as well, are going to be able to respond to hopefully what this change will bring.
Yes, well, that's a really important point. When I first started with CCUS, my focus was skilled trades. We had a project specifically on that, so I can talk forever about skilled trades. I'll give you the short version. So it's great that there's programming that's happening like that, right? So programming that's happening at the high school level is important. You mentioned guidance counselors. They definitely need to be on board with non-biased gender roles, allow these girls to do what they want to do, because you can compare, the technical skill that's required to run a sewing machine is not so different from the technical skill to run a bandwidth, right? So the why that exists, it makes no logical sense, right? Like you can create something with a sewing machine and you can create something with a lathe. And there's lots of girls who would do better. And when you listen to tradeswomen speak, there's very few, but they're growing. There's some really great professional speakers who are tradeswomen. And when they speak, they talk about that being one of their challenges. Whatever it is, they couldn't sit still in school. Whatever it was, they always liked doing things with their hands, but they were never encouraged to pursue that as a career. Once they fell into it from whatever weird career path they had, that's their home. Like that's what they love to do. It's what they just weren't encouraged to do it. So in addition to all of the encouragement, so parents are another one. Parents are almost the worst offender and
absolutely.
Particularly in newcomer families, I have to say that, because newcomer families come with a very high expectation, generally speaking, of course, there's exceptions, generally speaking, high expectations to pursue professional careers, medicine, engineers, maybe a lawyer, right? Like don't even consider the skilled trades, but honestly, that's where the jobs are. And
Mhm.
they have a bad reputation for not being good careers. They are very well paid careers. You can make a very good life. You can buy a very nice truck, boat, anything else you would like working as a tradesperson. The part that really needs some support. So I see the government doing, not just Ontario, but federally, giving a lot of supports to kind of college level, high school level, it's getting there. And entry level into like apprenticeship, getting into a first year apprenticeship funding. What we need to see more of is more retention related funding. So because they are leaving, these women are, the skilled trades workplaces are still the worst for bullying and harassment. It's very ingrained in the culture that bullying and harassment is, you pick on the new guy, you pick on the new girl, the microaggressions, the sexual comments are very rampant. The work is often isolating and that makes things worse, right? So women are dropping out at the same rate that they're going in. Like the representation of women in skilled trades is less than 10% and has remained less than 10% over more than 30 years. Like it's barely moving, right? So there has to be way more supports to create a safe workplace for women and skilled. That's what's really missing. Like there's all that other work needs to continue to happen. There's great programming and I'm glad to see more changes because it means we're not done yet, right? But the part that continues to be underserved is that retention. So how do we hold employers accountable to create these, like they are responsible for creating safe workplaces for their workers, which includes psychological safety.
Exactly.
But this is not as common as you would think.
No.
So there is some higher level accountability that needs to be put in place.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very true. Good. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much. That was amazing. Great answer. As a co-op teacher, I can tell you, I actually succeeded. This is a brag moment, but it was a total rare. In 12 years, they haven't had a co-op student go and do the level 1 apprenticeship. And one of my students did it this year. So that was huge.
Wow.
Now it's automotive and that sort of stuff, but it was just so cool. And my husband is retiring as an auto shop teacher. And man, I've learned so much through him about the need. And he did, girls only classes and blended
Oh,
classes.
great. That's amazing.
Just the way it should be, right? Take away all that stigma.
Yeah,
And that's
sometimes
what
they
it's
need it. They still need a safe space that still needs to be considered for girls during education, right?
And then they get the confidence they need. So when they go out into their,
then they're a bit more prepared to
so
stand
anyhow,
up
well,
for
thank you
themselves.
so much.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Nancy?
I just wanted to say that BPW Niagara Falls is very proud that we have created a bursary because we have the Niagara Regional Science and Engineering Fair next week.
Oh, great.
And we've created a $500 bursary, and that's pretty big for us because there's only 8 of us. We've created a bursary and it's to be awarded to a senior girl who shows aptitude and interest in, and to encourage her in the STEM career according to her project.
Amazing.
So we'll be there judging next week, judging the projects, and we'll be presenting on the 1st of April, I think it is. It's it's a Saturday. Yeah, it's a Saturday.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So, it's the only reason I even thought of it was because my kids were always in the science and engineering fairs. Mind you, my kids are both boys and they're both engineers. One's a mechanical engineer, one's an electronics engineer. But had they been girls, I suspect that given the environment here at our house, because my husband used to drag race 57 Chevys, and so he was always building street rods. And so my kids grew up in the garage and they each had their own street rod. And if they had been girls, they would have been out there with their dad the same. And I would have encouraged it too, because I know nothing about cars. It just saw as it works. And, but I'm very proud of our little club doing this. And I think we will continue to support our girls.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
great. They do continue to need the support for sure.
Yeah.
They still need
For
some space
sure.
carved out for them. Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things I've kind of changed my tune on is how career paths work, right? Because I've seen so many people take indirect career paths to where they end up being. I think there's no one way to do it, right? And one of the ways that when I was in high school, for instance, when I was in high school, I did not for a second consider taking a shop class. I didn't even take drafting. It was somewhat common for girls, like my sister took drafting, somewhat common for girls to take drafting. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I don't know what it was. I had some sort of like a bias against kind of blue collar work at the time, which is totally not my view today. And now my view is actually engineers would be better engineers if they learned a trade first, because first, if they learn how to make the thing, because that was because of my upbringing, I didn't have the opportunity to be in an auto shop, for instance. I didn't have the opportunity to be on the tools. I was always working theoretically, academically, and that's what I was kind of comfortable with. But had I challenged myself to get on the tools to a larger extent, I would have been able to solve problems differently, in fact. And that's what I see from people who have taken that career path. If they've already learned a trade, they know how things are built, physically built, then when you switch to design phase, you're going to be a much more efficient, you're going to take a much different approach to designing things if you've already been in the work of building it. So I encourage all sorts of people to take that career path. Why not, right? Like you can go at things all different ways. You can do a diploma in something and then a bachelor's in something else that's related, as long as it gets you to where you'd like to be. You can do a bachelor's in something and then do something related as your master's and get you to where you want to be. You don't have to do like a straight path, which I feel like guidance counselors were always good at giving us straight paths. Actually, I do feel that my high school guidance counselor like spent very little time with me, because academically I was good and I walked in and said, I'm going to study engineering. And they said, okay, I think you could do that. I don't think they really thought about what it would be like for me working as an engineer, right? They just kind of said, okay, yeah, so she could do the work. You can go study that. She'll be fine. No problem. But at no point was there ever a consideration like to even put that into perspective for me, right? And that's why I was totally surprised when I got there. I was like, what is going on in this workplace? This is not what it was like when I was studying.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so all the questions, I guess, are done. Thank you so much,
Great.
Bonnie. You've been amazing. If you'd like to stick around for a few minutes, we're just going to talk about what BPW International has been doing in BPW Canada. And I'm hoping, Sheila, you were at CSW, correct? Wow, you're muted. You're muted, Sheila.
Actually, I did not attend in person this year, but I have attended in other years, but not, so I was doing some things virtually,
Oh, okay.
not in person this year.
Yeah, so we're we have consultative status with the UN, and so CSW is the Commission on the Status of Women, and it happens every March. Well, I call it March break because I'm a teacher. And anyhow, it's an opportunity for women around the world to get together and discuss women's issues and see what can be changed. And there were some really good presentations. A couple of our members participated in. And that's so anyhow, so that's one of the big things that we do. BPW Canada, Sheila's one of the brains of the Ideas Project. And she's also been involved with the WEPS Women's Empowerment Principles, bringing that to our attention, as well as also one of the co-founders of the Canadian Coalition to Empower Women. So she's very much a key player in making wonderful things happen in Canada for us, and that as well. So those are some of the big things that we've been doing in Ontario. The speaker series is one of the events. And we have a mentoring program. It's called Women Empower or Strengthening Women. And so that's one of our big projects right now, and just trying to make the world a better place for all women and that sort of stuff. So yeah, anyhow, so I know Carrie's here and she's really quiet. She's in the same boat. She lives in the country too. She's the past president of Bowmanville. So I don't know if you want to share what's happening in Bowmanville right now, Carrie.
Thank you. I'm quiet because yes, my internet is unstable, but and I could lose you any moment. But yeah, we don't really have too much to add to what you've said, Heather. Bowmanville is starting to meet more in person. We have a new member, which is very exciting. And so in the last year, we've attracted 3 new members, which we're very
Awesome.
positive about, and getting some interest from others. So I would say things are good at Bowmanville, but beyond that, nothing specific to add.
Awesome.
I'll toss in a kudos to Bowmanville, Carrie, because BPW Bowmanville achieved 75% completion rate for the GBA plus gender-based analysis plus survey, where we as an organization are looking to learn more about and better give opportunities for our members to share their diversity and to help us as an organization. Again, kudos to Sharon Doran and her work as well with some of this work at BPW Ontario in the last earlier few years ago, so that we can in fact be an organization that creates that psychological safe environment for all women in all their diversity to benefit from belonging to such a vibrant organization. So yeah, so kudos to BPW Bowmanville. I'll just give you a plug. And so there's lots more excitement going to be happening with that information moving forward so that clubs can develop their own inclusion, diversity, equity, and access strategy for outreach in their community and welcoming all women. So that's going to be fun.
That's fantastic news. Awesome. And Jocelyn, do you want to share what's happening in Niagara Falls?
And certainly, I'm going to share my screen to show you what's going on tomorrow evening. We're having a very wonderful woman, Gloria Messenger, come and speak with us about the less yet equally important information to know when losing a loved one. So I encourage you to go to the website and register because it's tomorrow evening. And the really big event that we're working very hard at preparing is our Design Your Bag Bingo that was supposed to happen in 2020 and again in 2021, 2022, and is finally happening for us. And that is actually going to be on Friday, May 19th. So please go to our website and register. And it's just been an amazing time working with everyone. I really enjoy our very small club. We're a very small club, but we do great things, and no one ever says that, you know, because we're small and we don't have that many members, that things are not happening. They are happening. So thank you. I will put the site in the chat for you.
Thank you. And I'll just give you a little snippet about, I'm with the Hastings and Prince Edward Club. So it's basically Prince Edward County and Hastings County. And so we've been really busy. We actually co-hosted with the United Nations Association of Canada, Quinte branch, the International Women's Day on March 8th. And Carrie came with Jordan's her last name, I can't remember her first name, and some college students from Durham College. That was so exciting to see them there. And that was the first time we've ever been part of something like that. And we're hoping to do more wonderful things. And our membership is growing, and we're actually installing 10 women tomorrow night. Some of them never got, but part of it's because we haven't had in-person installation because of COVID. So anyhow, so we're really excited about that. But it's a great organization. I love it. I can't imagine not having BPW as part of my life. Anyhow, on that cheery note, I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I'll let Anne know that we're all good girls. No, I'm just teasing. Anyhow, take care, everyone, and we'll see you around.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Bonnie, so
Yes.
much.
Sure.
Good night, everyone.
Take care,
Thank you.
everybody.
Night.